It's March 2020. The Massachusetts courts have just shut down due to the coronavirus. And Chief Justice Gantz of the Supreme Judicial Court has written a letter addressed to the bar saying, let's think about what's coming ahead and see if we can find some way together to get through this. He asked the bar not to say no, but instead to ask, what if? After seeing this letter, Dean Perlman contacts myself and a couple of other faculty members and says, is there anything we at the university could do to help? So we put our heads together and we try to think, what are the problems facing the court going forward in the pandemic? And where are there places where we could help address those? So last week, we spent a lot of time about knowing what the problem is and then trying to find a solution to that problem. Of course, you also have to know about what your skills are and what you have to offer. And we were very lucky because only weeks prior, this is one of those situations where it's odd to think about it as saying we were lucky during this time. But we were, because we had just hired Quentin Stainhouse, previously of Greater Boston Legal Services, to join the lab that I direct at the law school. So our staff had gone from 1 to 2. And Quentin had experience building online tools to help people navigate responses to eviction matters. And he had been working and continues to work wonderfully with a platform called DocAssemble, which is a tool for building, for assembling documents. And we started to think, well, the two of us, don't have enough capacity to do something. But with Quentin's experience in DocAssemble and my experience running groups like the lab students that we work with and classes such as this, where we talk about building products and scaling them and solving real problems, perhaps we could serve as a convener to bring together a set of volunteers to help rise to the challenge. And hence was born the Document Assembly Line project. So what I'm going to do is this is going to be sort of a case study. What I'm going to do is I'm going to segue for a moment, and I'm going to share with you a video that we put together to explain the Document Assembly Line project. This was a project that was put together at the lab and with the cooperation of an army of volunteers across 5 continents, from Massachusetts Law Reform Institute and Greater Boston Legal Services, Northeastern Legal Aid, all here in the area, with cooperation from folks over at Northeastern. We've had volunteers at Bentley, just a large number of people coming together to try to rise to this challenge to help the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I'll just show you this short video to sort of orient you and tell you what it was we were building. This is a video that I presented to the Access to Justice Commission COVID-19 task force, of which I was a co-chair on one of the committees, the Access to Courts Committee. And that's actually where this then ended up living and coming out of in an attempt to try to give people access to the courts, even when they didn't have physical access. So we'll watch that video, 3 minutes, and then we'll be back.
Hi, I'm David Colarusso from Suffolk Law School's Legal Innovation and Technology Lab, and I'm going to give you an overview of the Document Assembly Line project run out of that lab, and it's going to be quick. So here we go. We're going to talk about what the project is. Spoiler alert, we're making online forms, what these forms do, how folks will find these forms, and when they'll be ready. What you're seeing now is an actual website that is ready and raring to go. We're just waiting for finalized paperwork with the court. As you can see, the page can present both in English and in other languages. Right now we have some volunteer translated Spanish content to give you an idea, but we're waiting on official translations from the court to include multiple target languages. The project is a volunteer collaboration spanning 5 continents, and we're very lucky that many local institutions and businesses have provided volunteers as well. We have a core group of a dozen or so full-timers and a little over 100 folks signed up to help. This includes coders, attorneys, and law students. And all the software we're producing is open source, which means there's no proprietary strings attached. So what are these forms? First, they are forms that the court identifies and approves. They are not fillable PDFs, which you have to pinch and zoom. You do not have to print them, sign them, scan them, and upload them to file them. They are guided interviews, presenting users with a set of questions that help guide them through the process of filing. And what you're seeing now is actually the first of our forms, a temporary restraining order in the housing context. They look good both on desktop computers and on your phone. So the user answers the interview's questions, producing a filled out PDF that we deliver directly to the court via secure email. Depending on staffing, it's even possible to provide users with access to a live chat so someone can help them fill out their forms while sharing their screen. So how do folks find these forms? So of course, folks could be linked directly to them from websites such as the courts or Mass Legal Help or similar sites. They could also be sent the forms via referrals from service providers and other entities. Then there's also the website you saw earlier where we'll collect all the forms and make them easily discoverable. Another use case is that someone could contact an advocate over the phone and that person could start filling out the form on their behalf and then share it with the user via a text or email to have them sign it before sending it on to the court. So when will something be ready? As I already mentioned, we could launch the site next week if we get all the paperwork done this week. I suspect it's probably about 2 days from signing to launch. What we have ready to go now is just a single form, but we're actively working on about 40 other forms identified by the court and can start to publish those on a rolling basis as we complete them and they are approved by the court. An important thing to remember is that the first version of these forms are going to be what designers call minimum viable products. That is, they're skateboards, not Ferraris. We're doing it this way because it means we can actually get something into people's hands sooner rather than later. Over time, we can go back and improve these forms, but the important part is giving people something they can use now. To underline the sophistication of this undertaking, I want to point out that the work product this project is creating would normally take months, if not years, to complete. And under normal times, it would probably come with a price tag in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That being said, all of our work is being released under an open source license, which means it is free to anyone to repurpose. In fact, our international volunteers hope to leverage the work we are doing to help their own jurisdictions. Suffolk may be hosting the project, but we only have 2 staff members working on it. There is an army of volunteers behind this, and their generosity and skill leaves me in awe every day. And from all of us, let me just say thank you for this opportunity to help.
All right, so that's a document assembly line project in a nutshell. Now, you heard me in there reference working out an agreement and some paperwork with the court. We ended up entering into a memorandum of understanding, which is basically an agreement to agree. But it helped clarify, although it's not the type of thing where we were saying there was no real consideration. It's not a contract in the strictest sense, but it's a document that helped us identify what everyone's expectations were and also what their responsibilities were respective of each other. So it allowed us to say, if we build this product and we do it in this way, then the court will agree that then they will allow them to put their stamp of approval on it or link to it from their website, et cetera, et cetera. So it laid out the groundwork for how all of that would work. And one of the secrets behind any project is that, and especially technology projects, it's not the technology alone that makes something a success. It's almost never actually the technology that makes something a success. It's the interpersonal work of getting buy-in, of understanding your users, knowing what they need, and coming to an agreement. And so that was actually, I think we actually set a record. I went from being on a call with the Chief Justice of the trial courts to them having a draft of the MOU the next day. And then, although I was optimistic it was going to be a little quicker, it took about 2 months. And within 2 months, we had sent that draft back and forth and actually had a memorandum in place, which is probably still a record for any MOU signed by the court or the university for that matter. So the thing and I can regale you with stories at some point, maybe during our synchronous meeting, but just imagine lawyers all the way up on both sides. So that was it actually was a fun process. I was going to be like all dated and like, oh, it was a fun process, but no, it actually was fun. There are times in your career when you're like, oh yeah, law school, contracts. That was a really great class. A shout out to Professor Farnsworth there, my contracts professor. Anyhow, so you've seen that. So that was the presentation to the Access Justice Committee. After that, we went ahead, we moved forward, and then we actually developed some forms. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to show you a clip from a webinar that we did after we sort of made our public release. And it's going to go more deep into one of the particular forms that we did produce, which is actually a set of forms for the 209A, what's called the 209A packet, which is the set of forms regarding abuse prevention, so restraining orders for domestic violence situations. And so you're going to see there Kate Berry from Greater Boston Legal Services, who was took point on this packet of forms. And really the thing here is I want you to look at this and understand how much these forms are something more than just a fillable form. We're not talking about a PDF where you're pinching and zooming, or something where you're just filling in data. We're talking about something that really can actually help a pro se client. And so I want you to sort of see sort of the robustness of what that product can look like. And then I also want to flag for you that if you do not have a final project idea for this class, that one of your options for a final project is to work on the document assembly line project. So we are still producing forms for the court and for download and use by attorneys or pro se litigants. And so if you do not know what you want to do for your final project for this class, and you like what's going on with the document assembly line class, with the document assembly line project, then you can actually take on one of these forms or a part of one of these forms for your final project. And so if that's something you're interested in, please talk to me. But you'll also, I think in this video, from time to time, a couple of folks, myself and Quentin, and maybe Maeve McClinchy, who was our project manager on this, you might see them pop in or out of the questions. Depends on where I'm going to have to go see exactly where I cut. It determines whether or not I go into the question and answers, but mostly let's hear from Kate.
All right, so I'm going to show you a bit of how the 209A interview runs. It's not the only interview we have ready and available on the website, but it's, like I said, I think it's one of the ones that's really been just a huge part of this whole process.
And it's worth flagging. It's a little bit different than some of the other interviews because it's not a direct send to the court. So the instruction is to complete your form and then call the court and have them help you figure out filing.
Right. So if somebody goes to the website for mass access, the 209A form is available now on the website to any member of the public who wants it. So they can go to start form and they come to this mass access page for the 209A interview. We have a few safety features that were really big priorities for us. There's an escape button that would take somebody to, I think, Google if they click it, as well as text that highlights that gives people extra guidance throughout the interview if they want to see that, but without overloading, the screen that users do see with too many words. A real piece of feedback we got from a lot of domestic violence advocates was that restraining orders for a lot of people are only part of an overall safety plan. And we wanted to make sure that, we weren't sending the message that this is the end all be all for any domestic violence survivor. So throughout the interview at several places, we do have, reminders of that. A restraining order is only part of your overall safety plan, and a phone number for SafeLink that people can go to. So it allows a couple different options. It allows people to complete the form themselves if they say, I need this order to protect me, and then it proceeds that way. It also is built in to allow advocates or attorneys to be the one filling out the form actually on the computer. If, for example, somebody doesn't have computer access, you can do, I am helping somebody else ask for this order, and that brings you to a different path where it asks you what is the name of the person who needs the order. So I'm going to skip ahead because it is a long interview. The 209A is a lot of different forms. There's a complaint, there's an affidavit, there's plaintiff and defendant information forms, as well as optional forms about children, possible child support affidavit, and a few more. And the interview does allow for all of them, depending on the answers that people say and people's needs. So I'm going to skip ahead to the affidavit portion because this was one of the ones that was, a lot of work and a lot of thought, and had a lot of feedback from different domestic violence advocates, and really specifically was the result of years of work by Caroline at MLRI building up, exactly how we want to phrase these questions. So we give some guidance. Again, it's supposed to be written in plain language that anyone should be accessible to most readers. And again, reminding people that SafeLink or domestic violence advocates can be a really big help in this process for users who do want some extra help. So we go through, we ask people, we order it, basically going, sorry, Zoom is causing me some issues here. Sorry?
Oh, no, I was just going to say we had a question about the escape button.
Oh, sure. What was the question?
Was just what is that there? Why is that there?
It's to allow for the fact that if people are in an unsafe situation and when they're navigating to this interview, maybe they're sharing a home with their abuser, and they realize that they're in a situation where somebody could be looking over their shoulder, they can get out quickly. And that's a feature that's on a lot of websites about domestic violence, so we wanted to include it here. And I think for our coders, they figured out how to get it to show on the phone as well as on the web browser, because all of this is also available on the phone.
And there was also a question about saving, so if you could catch that at some point too.
Yes, so people can save if they create a login and come back to it later at any point later. But I think you do have to create a login for that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, and
you
that can
create
be
a
done.
login through your cell phone or your email and come back at any point, so people don't have to do these all in one sitting. So it asks just a few basic questions about when and where the abuse happened, but then really the goal was to allow people to use their own words. And we don't want to be leading people, we don't want to be encouraging, telling people exactly what words to use. So it gives people a start, just like the Real 209A form does. And you can say where, and you can edit this. So like at noon at my house, and then the user can describe the incident in my own words. So they could say the defendant assaulted me. We try to give some guidance. If somebody doesn't know what to say, there's optional boxes they can click that just give examples of good text, a good example, or a good example and a bad example of what they could possibly write in the affidavit. And then after somebody describes the incident, it gives a few more follow-up questions of things that people could talk about if they want. We thought a lot about the police questions because we didn't want to suggest that people were doing anything wrong, of course, if they didn't call the police. So a few times throughout, we emphasize, it's fine that if you didn't call the police, but if it's something you might want to address in your affidavit. So if somebody says, yes, the police were involved, they can add that again in their own words. And it goes through that for a few more things, like were there injuries? I'm not going to do that for the sake of time. Was there medical treatment? People have the option of saying how it made them feel. And again, at the end, they can always add or change anything. So it's kind of building up, the affidavit, how they want to say it. And then they can add additional incidents. And again, I'm not going to do that for the sake of time. But again, they always get the chance to keep reviewing the affidavit and making edits. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead again to, were there more? I can kind of see questions popping up. I can't see what they are.
There was just a question about saving and your ability to go back to the affidavit. I think you did mention that it will keep coming back to the affidavit for a couple of questions with framing. But I had responded in the chat that one of our next things was helping to be able to jump around in that. But if you want to address that, you can.
Okay. So I think I'll move forward. So has that been addressed? Sorry.
I can pop in on that
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we're working on basically a way to let you edit all of your questions in any order you want. What we felt was that wasn't ready for us to release to the public yet, and we're hoping to add that soon. That's part of our iterative design. But right now, there is the ability for you to edit things by using the back button. And for some important things, we've let you change your wording along the way, like the affidavit that you just saw. You can change it before it becomes the final affidavit.
So I'm going to skip ahead again and to the defendant information form, because I think this was a nice job on this. That's, again, the portion of the 209 interview. It asks for a lot of kind of detailed questions about the defendant. And to somebody going through this packet, through the application, it might seem like, why are you asking this? Especially if it's after you've done a whole bunch of other forms. So we wanted to give people, let people know why are we asking this? This is all about finding the defendant, so that the defendant can actually get a copy of the restraining order, to, encourage people to provide this information when they otherwise might be tempted to just, skip. And a lot of the questions throughout, if I say no, John's never used another name, I can just proceed. If I say yes, we get a follow-up question. What other name has John used? And I can give the aliases. Actually, something that I think is pretty cool is it asks for the social security number, and we really wanted to be sure that somebody isn't putting in the whole thing. So it doesn't let you. So we're not violating hopefully any privacy rules. Another really cool feature is the defendant information form asks you if you have a photo of the defendant. And if you want to upload one, we can do that right into and that goes right into the restraining order packet. Sorry, Quentin?
Your phone's camera, I think that's worth saying too. Obviously you wouldn't be wanting to take a picture of the defendant, but if you had like a printed out photo in your room, that's something you could snap a picture right there on your smartphone.
And again, there's a lot of questions about the defendant, and we wanted to make it as easy as possible to answer those. And we gave a lot of multiple choice where that otherwise might not exist. And we were trying to balance that with the very, very small boxes that appear on the form. So we kind of, gave some ways of doing that. And I'll skip ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, it's important to note that the end product of this is a form that would look like a packet produced in any other way, so that the court staff is getting something that for them is indistinguishable from someone having filled out the standard forms.
And I'll skip ahead one more time to the signature flow. So how do people actually sign this form? So before people so they're shown a preview. I skipped that portion, but they do get a preview of what everything's going to look like. And then right before they sign, we put, a reminder that people are signing under oath, and affirmatively make people swear under oath, swear that everything has been true under the pains and penalties of perjury. The way we did this was actually specifically after we had a prosecutor review this. There were some concerns that we didn't have the oath done in a way that would allow this to stand up in court. So we changed that based on feedback that we got. So people affirmatively right now are swearing under oath. And then they can sign in two different ways. They can sign on the phone, which allows them to either, scan this in or to their phone through their camera app, or they can get texted a link that lets them sign using the touchscreen on their phone, or they can just sign on their computer. And what that does is it takes a few seconds of work. It will work.
And for the forms that are much smaller, it doesn't quite take as long. But what's the average size of these forms again, Kate?
Long. It's like they come out, at a minimum, this is like 4 pages. And if you do every part of the interview, it can be like 13 pages. So they end up with, your forms are ready to download and file. Again, people do have to contact their courts to see how the courts want them to file, because the courts have some different practices that vary across the different courts that accept 209As. But we give them the phone number for the court right there and the address for the court so they can do that easily. And that gives them the copy of the information. So, oh, and also actually they have the option to email the document to themselves or to a friend or to somebody that can keep these documents safe if they wanted it for later use. And what we get is this final product that is all of the forms that they generated. And actually, let me switch to the one I had pre-prepared. So we have a little bit of information for the user that kind of tells them about their next steps with some key information about, what they should do next. Keep a copy for yourself, contact the courts, things like that. And I think this was adapted from some of the text that was already on Mass Legal Help, I think. But it's meant to be in, plain language for the users so they can understand it easily, and connects them to Mass Legal Help for more resources. And then we have the entire 209A packet, the complaint, things that I didn't show you, but if I had put a lot of text in the affidavit, for example, it has built-in addendum that, allow for that kind of overflow.
I like lots of text.
Yeah. If they had children, it fills out the appropriate forms for children. If the affidavit disclosing care and custody, which is required if there were current or prior cases between the parties, it actually fills out that. And I know that was a challenging form, I understand, because it's a challenging form. It also allows people to ask again for child support. If they're requesting that, they can do the affidavit in support of child support, the pre-existing court form, as well as the plaintiff confidential information form, defendant form. The photograph is right in there, as well as the impoundment form if they wanted to do that. Right, so I think that's all I have for the demonstration. Were there more questions?
Yeah, there was a question about how do folks figure out what court to use? Is there guidance on that?
Yeah, there is there is a fair bit of guidance in the interview, and there's been a lot. That's been a real topic of discussion of, how to present the choice between probate court and district court. There is guidance on that about how that interacts with people's, if they want to request visitation or not. And
it may be worth saying that there's some places where you have to choose a certain court, and we help people only make correct choices about the court. Like if they choose visitation, we only show them the probate and family courts. If they have a dating relationship, we don't show them the superior court. And we let them go back in and make corrections if after they realize they've limited their court choice, they don't want to stick with that choice.
Yeah, and it's important to, there's always the option to go back if they know that it needs to be something else.
But yeah, I think the guidance on court selection was a lot of time went into that, and how to word it in a plain and simple way, what can be kind of a complicated choice. And I think that's another point in the interview that we say, if you really don't know what to do, you can talk to an advocate. And again, we try to link to advocate information. I think that's a point we have that. And there's always if people want, more information, we link to Mass Legal Help at points to try to let people make, the best choices that they can with legal information that's available.
So that being said, I think we're kind of at the point where we go, hey, here's a bunch of, thank you. Let's move into, look at all the wonderful people on the panel. So below, you're going to learn more about DocuSign, and you'll have your shot at programming a little bit. So let's get to it. Good luck.